Hey everybody, so we're here with another Ed puzzle. This one will be shorter, admittedly, for a couple of reasons. One, I want to give you a chance to start working on the final if you have time. And two, we already covered most of this in the video that we watched right before break. So our reading in the textbook takes off after the death of Julius Caesar. So remember, before Caesar, Rome was ruled um, as a republic. So the people voted for senators, and the senators made the laws. There wasn't an emperor. Now, if things got bad, if there was a famine, if there was war, if there was a natural disaster, the senators would choose somebody to be the emperor. But it was understood that when the crisis was over or the problem was solved, that the emperor would give power back to the senators and to the people. Eventually, along comes Julius Caesar, and he's the first real Roman emperor. He rules the army, uh, the senators answer to him. He is unquestionably In charge. He does a lot of things well. He's an incredible general of the military, and he expands Rome's territory from Italy out into the rest of Europe, which brings in more people and more wealth. But he got a little too power hungry and ends up being assassinated by a group of senators. So he's killed by a group of senators. So this leads to a period where it looks like things could get really ugly. There are a lot of people fighting for power, um, including Caesar's nephew, Augustus, who we see pictured here. Augustus ends up becoming probably, if not the greatest Roman emperor, the most beloved Roman emperor. Um, he is able to fight off his enemies and get power, and he becomes the next emperor after Julius Caesar. And Augustus rules much better than his uncle did. Uh, he he has all the authority. People respect him and listen to his word, and he's again a great leader and a great general. But he also lets the people at least believe that they have some power. He lets the senators have some power. And while he's emperor, he ushers in or he brings in this period known as the Pax Romana, which is this period of peace in Rome where uh, where there's just great wealth and great expansion of Rome. Um, he uh, he solved a lot of the problems that were around before him. He made sure that people had enough food to eat. He created these big, what they would have called circuses or big events like gladiator fights where people could entertain themselves and relax and forget about their worries. He made the government just run much more efficiently and effectively. Um, and again, he kind of restored law and order. Uh, he uh, he was also great at putting down threats, so he kept his army happy. If they were um, if they were out of work, he would give them land and places to farm and make sure that they had food and that their family had food. But when they were in the army, they were constantly pushing their land outwards, which would then make more money for the Roman state, for the Roman Empire. So Augustus does basically everything well. He got off to kind of a rocky start when he was younger and more immature, but he ends up being what we call deified. And to be deified means that the Romans took Augustus, who was a normal human, and when he died, they kind of turned him into a god or thought of him as a god. That's how much they loved him and cared about him. Okay, So this period, he doesn't rule for 200 years, but it's his system that he sets up that allows Rome to be so successful for 200 years, right? So we see here, this is under um, Augustus and the emperors that followed him. They expand their land a crazy amount. I mean, we see here's Rome. I'll zoom in as much as I can, right? Here's Rome in the center of my screen. They expand their land into Gaul, which would be modern day France, into Spain, all the way up into Great Britain, south into Africa, to Egypt, even uh, near India and China. Um, they build roads, they build trade routes, and they are the unquestioned most powerful empire to this point in the history of the world. Um, they have this trade allows for a really strong economy. They have a strong military. Um, they have access to all different kinds of goods because of their trading, right? They can go to Spain where they would get metals or where they would get wine. They could go to France where they would trade for wild animals. They could go to Britain where they would trade for metals. They could go to Egypt where they would trade for textiles to make clothes out of or to get grain. Um, and all this time they have to build, as we saw in our video, all these roads and bridges that are that are just these incredible um, examples of kind of the genius of ancient Rome. And this is all during that period that is made possible by Augustus. So I mentioned Roman engineering. So again, I won't go into as much detail here. It's more a review of the video that we saw. But the Roman road system was incredibly impressive. I mean, their roads would stretch for thousands and thousands of miles, hand built by soldiers and slaves, stretching all across Europe. Many of the roads still survive to this day. You can see them walking through all different parts of Europe and all different parts of the former empire. And these allowed people to travel easily. And remember, it was also really impressive. Consider if you were like kind of a farmer in France, and all of a sudden you see this huge Roman army marching towards your farm. Uh, you might be a little scared, but you're also going to be really impressed. And then what wins you over is, okay, these guys aren't here to like kill us and burn everything down. They're here to build these roads so that we can now travel to Rome and we can trade with Rome. And so it helps bring the people of the empire together. They also build arches and aqueducts, and arches are impressive. Just they're this curved structure built of stone or marble. They're really just impressive for how they're built. But the aqueducts are kind of the more impressive thing as far as being useful. Remember, the aqueducts were the way that water was moved from place to place. These could stretch for hundreds of miles from a city to like a mountainside, so that the people in the city could have fresh water coming. They would. It's kind of like how we get oil now. They would uh, have a pump go through the ground to drain up this fresh water, and it would travel along these aqueducts um, on this kind of slight slope, and the water would travel all the way into the big cities like Rome, where the people could then have access to that water. Um, let's see what we can find as far as what these aqueducts look like as a reminder, right? So, there are these big, long, arched stone figures that carry water from place to place. Here's another example. And they would carry water from the mountains and the villages into the city so that the people in the city had access to water. So here's the Colosseum, which again is a great example of just incredibly impressive Roman architecture. When you think of this enormous stadium, which was basically like their version of football stadiums. So if you think of like Soldier Field or Lambeau Field, this is kind of their version of that. But again, it was built by hand. Like they didn't have uh, the machinery and computers that we have that to help them build. This was done by hand, and it's just some of the cool things about it. I mean, one, they would have the water, the sewage system running underneath it was uh, allowed them to. They could like turn the valves or the pipes in certain directions, and they could flood the floor of the Colosseum, like that middle section, and fill it up with water so that uh, they could like stage naval battles for people to watch. Um, the sound was also incredible in the Coliseum. People sitting up here in like the back row could clearly hear the actors down on the stage below. Um, and the Coliseum was where people went to be entertained. They would have games. People would fight wild animals. They would have gladiator matches where they would fight, where like trained warriors, like this guy down here, would fight each other to the death. Um, the emperor would go to these. The senator would go to these. Everyday people would go to these. It was again, I make the comparison to football, right? Like in the United States, uh, on Sunday, things kind of shut down around in quote like football towns like in Chicago when the Bears are playing and when there are fans there when it's a normal non-pandemic year when the Bears are playing, go to the like store, just to the grocery, and it's usually pretty empty because everybody's either at the Bears game or they're watching the Bears game. That's how the Coliseum was. Like everybody wanted to go to these things, and the town sort of shut down around them. Um, I'm going to skip that. It's not really important. Here's Pompeii. Um, so I mentioned Pompeii in the last Ed puzzle. Uh, Pompeii was a town at the foot of a mountain that was also a volcano. It was called Mount Vesuvius, and it was Pompeii was kind of your typical Roman city. It had its theaters, it had its houses, it had its baths. It was just your typical Roman city. And one day, Mount Vesuvius erupts and spews lava and ash, and it all just comes crashing down on the city of Pompeii as people are just living their normal lives. And this happened in the year 79 AD, so over 1900 years ago, almost 2000 years ago. And what's incredible about Pompeii and what makes it this amazing historical site that is still one of the most popular places to visit in Italy is that the ash from the volcano preserved the people and many of the buildings, even some of the animals, like some of the dogs. It preserved them in sort of these plaster casts that to this day still stand. And so if you go to Pompeii, you will see uh, this is a human. Like this is not a statue or uh, an art exhibit. This is a human that was living in Pompeii in the year 79 AD of the Roman Empire, who died in this volcanic eruption and um, was preserved by the volcanic ash. And so again, this is like an actual human. Here are more examples, and it's incredibly powerful to see. There was an exhibit at the Field Museum probably probably 15 years ago, um, and they brought some of the people and furniture and buildings to the Field Museum. And it's incredible to see, but it's also really useful for historians because we can study how the people lived because we see what furniture they had. We see, that they had pets because some people uh, died clutching their pets. Um, we see some people died clutching their slaves, which showed us the relationship that they have with slaves. So it's an incredible example of of like living history. And probably I would anticipate after finals we'll watch some kind of documentary about Pompeii because it's incredible. Um, all right, so I'm gonna stop there, I believe. Let's see what's next. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there, and as always, pause, ask questions, whatever you gotta do.